So welcome back, everybody. I apologize for the cold that I have, but I believe Be'ezus Hashem we'll be able to pull through. So I will just note a few things over here. Firstly, that this shir today similar. We mentioned it then, even though then it was really pertinent to the Sefer, which we're learning, the studies in the Sefer Hatanya. We think about 2-3 classes ago was on the day of Chavdalet Tevis, which was the yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe. But I will just note again, it was related to the Sefer Hatanya, which is again the Sefer of the Alter Rebbe. The magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe, certainly in Nister Teid. Obviously, he was the Rav, the Baal HaShulchan Aruch. As we mentioned, then today is also a very special day. I just want to again point out this day is Yud Shvat, which is the passing of the Rebbe Rayatz. Now, the Rebbe Rayatz was the 6th generation in the development of Teres Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe naturally the first. The founder of Chassidus Chabad, following the Baal Shem Tov, was the founder of Chassidus HaKlalis, while the Rebbe Rayatz was the 6th, he passed away in 1950. Yet he was part of this important dynasty which brought Chassidus to the world. One of the 7 Rabbeim which brought Chassidus to the world. As in that very last Maimer that he released prior to his passing, speaks actually about the bigger picture of the 7 tzaddikim, which ultimately brought the Shekhinah down to this world. So the famous Medrash of Basi Lagani Achesi Kala, the Eibishter says that I came back to my garden after Mount Torah, namely after the building of the Mishkan. And the Medrash goes on about when Hashem created the world, the main divine presence was in this world, yet unfortunately the 7 sins, main sins of Adam Rishon and then of Cain and so on, as the Medrash goes on to enumerate the Shekhinah has left the Zion, this world, and ultimately the Zion Rakim, the 7 heavens. Then came Avram Avinu, and as the Medrash continues, and started bringing back the Shekhinah from Rekiah Aleph to Rekiah Beis, and Yitzchak from Rekiah into the next following Rekiah, and Yaakov, and he enumerates all the 7 tzaddikim, the 6, and then came the 7th, Moshe. The Medrash continues, Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Shekhinah back down to this world again. Basi Lagani, Hashem says, I came back to my garden. So Moshe Rabbeinu was made the Shekhinah. He brought the Shekhinah from the final Rakiah down into this physical world. Moshe Kibul Tev Sinai. He brought the idea of Shem Hashem, the knowledge of Hashem, the most profound parts of Hashem, namely via the Teda that Moshe was the Mekabel, the one who transmitted Teda to the world, to Am Yisrael primarily, and then would become Eir Lagoy. Namely, as we mentioned, when the Mishkan was built, it became a permanent edifice for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Obviously, it wasn't the ultimate permanence. It was still a Eihel, it was still a Mishkan. But that was the beginning of the process of bringing down the Shekhinah. So, as is explained in the Maimer, and when the Rebbe picked up on the Nesius, on the leadership, formally, actually was obviously very indicative that the Rebbe was the following Nasi, but our Rebbe did not formally accept leadership for a full year, in spite of beseech and begging, for that matter, of so many of the elder Chassidim and people who understood the greatness and the grandness of the Rebbe in every area of Teda and knowledge of Teda and every part of Teda, the vast, you could even say unique, perhaps even unprecedented style of that expansive knowledge in every single part of Teda to its detail, Nista the Teda, Nigla the Teda, and a very, very unique type of also the quality of the Rebbe's understanding of Teda, as later was unfolded by the 190 volumes of the Rebbe's Teda, and correspondence and so on. So despite people, again, it was very obvious that the Rebbe would be the successor of the previous Rebbe, but the Rebbe did not with the whole entire year for that matter, would not formally accept the mantle of leadership till a full year on Tafshin Yud Aleph 1951, where he began the minor of analyzing and elaborating on that very minor which the previous Rebbe left off before his passing. And then again, the same Basi Legani, he points out that this is, again, as the Frierdiker Rebbe was a sixth generation from the Alter Rebbe, and this would be the seventh generation, called it the Deira Shvi. Obviously, the Rebbe never spoke about himself personally, always attributed leadership, not only then, 40 years into the Rebbe's leadership, and global impact, literally global impact in every area of Torah mitzvahs. The Rebbe single-handedly, perhaps even you can say that obviously eventually through his shluchim, but the message and the Rebbe's effort to have in such a profound impact, metamorphosing an entire world, obviously with as the world as a whole, bringing the Elokus, introducing godliness to every corner of the world. There is no, so the Rebbe points out there in the Maimer, the Rebbe points out there, so again, for a full year, the Rebbe didn't accept any seats, but when the Rebbe began that very Maimer, Basi Legani saying, namely we're saying, the Rebbe never spoke about, despite the Rebbe made such an important impact in the entire world, as we all know, and we find out so much more, endless information, even after Tafshin and Dalet, endless information of coming out now, even more than ever, the Rebbe's accomplishments worldwide, additional to the thousands and thousands of centers of Yiddishkeit across the entire globe. But yet, even all this was happening, the Rebbe never attributed leadership to himself, always attributed to Elokei Avraham or Elokei Avi, in this case similar to the Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, or Moshe, and so on, always to his father-in-law, the Rebbe, my father-in-law, the Rebbe, Nisi Dereinu, and so on. But yet, the Rebbe made it very clear in the first Maimer that this is the Deira Shvi, which is going to ultimately, the seventh generation, is going to ultimately bring down the Shechina in a permanent basis, again, never to leave again Olam Hazeh, this physical world. As we mentioned, this is the main place we learned in these prakim, which was the revolutionary information which was definitely revolutionary, which was expressed via the Tanya of the Alter Rebbe, that this is the place where Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu Lislei Dira B'Tachtenim. Obviously, it's predicated on a medrash in Parshas Nasei, Tanchuma, medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Nasei, that it's about this very physical world where the core essence of the divine desires to be, and ultimately makes sure, in other words, via the Avodas Yisra Veda of the service and toil of Am Yisrael, to make sure that the Shechina is here and it stays here and it's permanent here, because this is where Hashem's essential desire is to be, and His core essence is more here, even infinitely more than Hashem's presence in Gan Eden, in the highest levels of Gan Eden, Elam Haba, and Gan Eden Atach, Gan Eden Halin, and so many infinite levels of Gan Eden is brought down in Sfarim, Sifrei Kabbalah, and so on. And there's infinite levels in Gan Eden. Yilchu Yetzadikim, like the Gemara says, Yilchu Michael El Choyil, to no end, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu is Ein Sof, yet this is all a ray, a ziva of the Shechina, a ray of the Shechina, as opposed to this world. That's where Nisava, Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu is lalai, to the core essence of Kodesh Baruch Hu, is definitely down here in this very physical world. And this is again the message of the Medrash Basi Legani. Hashem says, I came back to where I wanted to be again in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, which he was the seventh tzaddik, and we brought down the Shechina permanently then, or began the process. And eventually, the Rebbe pointed out, these are the Shiva Tzaddikim, which Megala, the Eir Shivas Yimei Bereshis. It wasn't just another Teda, another ideas of Teda, they were Megala. This was the Eir Shivas Yimei Bereshis, started from the Baal Shem Tov, and again, namely via the Alter Rebbe or Talmidim, the Valdim, the Talmid of Baal, but in a very structured manner via the unique compilation of the Alter Rebbe, which was the founder of Chassidus Chabad, which gave over most profound concepts, again, of Pnimis Atera, the esoteric part of Torah, via in the intellect. It could be appreciated by the intellect. That's what's called Chabad, which is wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. The acronym of Chochmah Bina Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So in a very structured, and again, these are the tzaddikim which were Megala, thousands of Sfarim, Sifrei Chassidus, which is an important, not only another part of Torah, but is definitely the Eir of the Shiva Simei Bereshis, which this is the tantamount to and preparation of preparation to the Yemei Mashiach, which there is going to be Molo Ha'aretz De'es Hashem. The entire land will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, and this is definitely the entry. This is the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, Torah of these Shiva Tzadikim, starting from the Alter Rebbe, which will lead, which is the taste, and not only the taste, this is the entry into the Yemei Mashiach, that a human being, despite having this 2 feet very anchored into Elam Hazak, could have an adequate appreciation and das as Hashem, and accurate knowledge of his Creator. Not the derech emunah, only in an abstract manner, and not in a very real, tangible, palpable, structured knowledge. Again, like the Rambam's last halacha in the Rambam, the second to last halacha, kifikecha adam, based on the capacity of man. But yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the adaita, and he exposes himself, and that man can have a clear and accurate appreciation of his Creator. Which again, this is the revolutionary opening of the Gilui, of the revelation of Teres Achsidus, starting from the Alter Rebbe. So even again, we mentioned this by the Alter Rebbe because this is the Sefer Atanya, which is the main Sefer, the Sefer, as it was called among Chassidim, Teres Shebiksav of Teres Achsidus. But I mentioned today Yud Shvat because this is all one Hemshech, even though it's the sixth Tzaddik, the sixth Rebbe, which was the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, which was again another chain of this very important link, additional to his tens of Sfarim and Maimorim of discourses, Chassidus, his Mesiris Nefesh for Torah, for Yiddishkeit, was certainly unprecedented. One could learn a little bit of the life of the previous Rebbe, and again, I mentioned this. That again, today's is the yahrzeit. Naturally, this is the day as well when the opening of the seventh generation came about, which the Shekhinah comes and as we see it again, as it penetrates more and more in the tachtein, in the very physicality of Elam Hazeh, as we see it, that Elam Hazeh and ultimately this physical world not only is not a contradiction to Elokus, to godliness, but more so the world more and more appreciates the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, we could talk about it in so many different ways, and what we'd like to continue or start today's shiur, but to note, and again, for many different, even the secular world, science and so on, you see how Torah and Elokus, godliness, and the Emes Hashem becomes Emes Hashem La'elam more and more. So this is again the point. This is how the Shekhinah, this is the penetration of Shekhinah into Elam Hazeh. This is the point of Moshe Rabbeinu, to bring it in, not only to remain abstract and the Rekiim, in the heavens above, but Dafka down here, Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai, and brings it down, builds a Mishkan, and this is again the point, as that I've explained in that discourse, and that is the point of the Deir Ashvi, the seventh generation, to bring it down, Lamata, and it should be permanent and so on, as we see also the idea of there's no corner of the world which is not ready to accept Yiddishkeit, and even again Jews and Lahavdil, non-Jews, more and more there's appreciation of the Emes Hashem Li'elam. So the Frierdiker Rebbe was that sixth link in bringing down the Shekhinah, and I will just mention again with Alter Rebbe notes about a yahrzeit, such a great tzaddik. All his doings, all his teiros, all his service, is Eila L'mayla, and then in return, Peli Shuiz B'Kerev Haaretz, one of the Alter Rebbe's Igris Kedesh, which is printed in the Sefer Atanya, which, when you think about the Ma'aseh Teiros Avodasi, again of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, anybody here could also look into, you could even Google it today. There's so many books written of unprecedented Mesiras Nefesh, one who fought the communist Russian government. He was imprisoned 8 times for his Mesiras Nefesh, starting from when he was a young child. When he had Mesiras Nefesh, even just an appreciation of helping another Yid. As a young child, under 10 years old, was already thrown into prison for his self-sacrifice against, again, those who oppressed Yidden, Yiddishkeit, and so on, and eventually the final arrest, which was 1927, when he was placed in very, very harsh, the famous arrest in Shpalerka, the Shpalerka prison, which people did not usually come out alive, as he writes in his diary, the personal experiences, which was only miraculous that he actually came out and eventually he was able to leave Russia. I must add, it was the intervention. There was a levush hateva as well. There was a garment of nature, meaning to say there was an intervention in many countries around the globe, even though that itself is a miracle for the former Soviet Union. The Union didn't really care what other people said in world opinion, but eventually they were successful to persuade them. But yet it remains one big miracle. As I personally testified, I gave this over at a different opportunity. When I was myself in Russia in 1989, I was giving over the story because in the summertime that's Yud-based Thomas David's liberation. So I was giving over the story of that as Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice for Yiddishkeit around the former Soviet Union. There was hundreds of mikvahs and yeshivas and chadorim underground, which were literally outright dangerous for those who led them, for those who were functioning, who brought them to function, learning Torah with Jewish children, mikvahs and yeshivas, and all underground. Naturally, at those times, it was not only dangerous theoretically, many people were literally shot just for being caught teaching children, and sent to Sibir for many years. And he led this whole underground revolutionary enterprise. And eventually they caught up to him, and his life was, he even saw one of his documents, they said he saw himself, it said death, and it was crossed out, and then it was miraculous stages. Again, we're not going to go into the whole story. He was 10 years and supposed to be sent away. He went down to 3, and then eventually, after 1 week, he was liberated and eventually allowed to leave Russia. Well, it was again a miracle. And it's also actually, I was saying, the story in Russia. I was there on an outreach program, and so I was in a town called Donetsk, and I was giving over the story to its detail. And one guy says, there's something, Rabbi, you're lying. I said, why am I lying? This is factual. He says, we knew, and this is like a 70-year-old man or 75-year-old man. He says, we knew when we were growing up as youngsters, and this is again the time frame. It wasn't so much. He was already born at that time. And this individual spoke up and he said, we knew as youngsters, whoever went into Shpalerka never came out of Shpalerka. And you're telling me someone came out of Shpalerka, which again, to me, just aggrandize in my mind the the miracle which transpired. Then he was able to leave and eventually came over because he was in Russia, in Europe for 10 years, survived the Holocaust and came over to America and as well, together with others. But a main driving force with a message of America is nicht anders, America is no different than the old shtetl, which was a prevalent wind, a very forceful wind which was blowing and even penetrating from the homes. That things are different over here than the old shtetl. His theme was, as he came into America, and he says America is nicht anders, and with this really he began that whole transformation and metamorphosing, as we see today, the complete transformation of Yiddishkeit throughout the entire world. And we come as, again, 10 years later, when the Deir HaShvi begins, Shechina penetrates, and again we see it so evidently, Dafka with Shmiras HaTorah VaMitzvos, Tikutze Shel Yud, and without any compromise in every area of halacha, if it's cholav and cholav Yisrael and pas Yisrael, in every area, and the tzir and the tzelem elikim, which is again the tzelem elikim which is given to Yid, with the bird and payas and dafka without any compromise in every area in life. as the Rebbe, the leader of the Dei Rashvi, was empowered and emphasized, empowered so many and emphasized this message that it's dafka the Shmiras HaTorah mitzvahs without any compromise in no area at all. That will ultimately be niskabel, will be accepted in every part of the world. Because in the end of the day, Yiddishkeit and the Yid are essentially inherently one, and it's about being megala, just not something to bring a chidush to people, but to reveal who they are. And when there's any compromise in any area, people feel it consciously or subconsciously, and the message doesn't adequately penetrate. Can probably a bit here and there, but it won't work in the long run. We see the success at every corner of the world in the people who are completely distant from Yiddishkeit. The message of the purity, the untainted Teidas Emes, has penetrated in ways which were unimaginable, certainly not in the 50s, when the Rebbe again began with his leadership, his unique leadership, which also again began Yud Shvat, Hashemesh, V'Zarach Hashemesh, that very same day of the passing of the previous Rebbe, but formally Tafshin Yud Aleph, 1951, when the Rebbe began with that Maimer Basi Lugani, and the rest is, as they say, history. So, and again today, more and more, like the Alter Rebbe himself says, Yatir mi b'chayehi. The kayach and the message and the leadership is even more than ever, as we can see, dafka, the blossom and the sprout of their centers. And again, today it's thousands, literally, in all the 4,700 centers worldwide. And together with, ultimately together, the Emes Hashem La'elam, together with everybody, together with so many great leaders as well in Am Yisrael, which carry their personal torch to their communities, and eventually the world is going to definitely appreciate one day that the entire land is full with Dasas Hashem, the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kamayim Li'am Mechasim, like the Rambam finishes his entire Sefer Yad HaChazaka based on the pasuk in Yeshaya, Kamayim Li'am Mechasim, like the water covers the ocean floor, that it doesn't remain anything of the ocean floor which is not covered with water. Though too, eventually the entire world is going to more and more connect with that Das Hashem, or actually have that knowledge of their Creator, which is the ultimate purpose why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world, the unity of creation with Creator. So this very important day, again, we're giving the shir of the Tanya, which was the opening, the one who opened this whole new Gilui of the Eir of Pnimis HaTorah in this very unique and again unique manner of transmission, as we mentioned before. So I felt it was important, it would only make sense rather to mention that today's shir is given on the day of Yud Shvat. So Chibitaka, namely Pele, Shuiz B'Kerev Haaretz, all this important energy should make an impact B'Kerev Haaretz, in the very midst of Haaretz, individually and collectively to all of Am Yisrael. We should talk about Zeicha to that Yom, to that day, that promised day, the day which we anticipate B'Chol Yom. And again, it should be manifest B'Kerev Haaretz, not only somewhere up there, but in the very midst, in the very Haaretz, in the very physical land, the physical experiences. The entire world should ultimately become that Dira Le'Yisbarach, that dwelling place for Hashem. Getting back to where we're holding is, remember last week we began Perek Lamed. We mentioned last week, I happened to make a bracha already, as I mentioned, I feel good, it's just drinking a little bit more. So I mentioned last week, and I want to reiterate, it's a bit of a more of a complicated Perek. I can say this is the first chapter, which one has to have a bit of a some understanding, even though the point over here is to explain even things which are new, relatively new, and once we learn this time and again as we continue Perek Lamed, we'll definitely have some type of understanding and appreciation of all these concepts of the different elements and so on, as we mentioned last week. But we will continue with, again, as much as we could, continue to explain these concepts and topics over here. We will do so as we go along this very chapter. So again, to see the previous class, from the beginning of the Lamed Tes, and so to all the other classes. As we mentioned all along, you could put in the Tanya in the link box, Tanya online, Tanya in this very website, and then in this same the Shir itself. We encourage also TanyaOnline.com, hosted by the same host. The only advantage that it's a website precisely for this Tanya class, which is the advantage. Again, you have the whole entire Tanya class on this. Again, this is the Shir it carries, and namely that you can easily follow along with the text, and as well easy access to all the previous classes from the very beginning. Also, as you click on the class, which you would be looking for, it's always, as you open up any class, rather, you could also follow along immediately with the text, which is related to that particular class. So it's TanyaOnline.com, one word. And so we explained last week, Dalton opened up the chapter, that's the reason why Malachim are called Chayis and Behemes. Pnei Ari Elayim, Pnei Shem Rasmel. Again, not going to go over this whole. Again, you go back to just this very last class, the first class up till now. This one would be coming up, like again, a few hours, usually within a few hours after it comes up on the main website. But last week, which is the last class, we explained this whole idea. And again, as we see in Tanakh, Malachim are called Chayis Behemis, animals and beasts and so on, based on the different psukim. And the question is why? How could you identify the Chayis, the Malachim, with such definitions and terms? We explained that the difference of the human being and the animals. The animal also has a structure of feelings and a structure of different types and different dimensions, love, fear, and so on, and all the other midas for that matter. Yet it's more innate, inherent with the animal as opposed to man. Not only he has those inherent, innate feelings, but also he can develop qualitative feelings based on his intellect. Man was Meiser Ha'adam Min HaBehema, the fact that it has intellect, the advantage and virtue of man or animal is intellect, as well naturally power of speech, which is interconnected. And so because of his intellect, he could ponder, he can meditate and ponder on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that produces, because Seichel is mainly, produces midas in every area of life. Again, we spoke about this then as well in the past, different times and opportunities, and based on the information we learned in the Tanya, that mind produces seichel, and the intellect produces a feeling, a character, an attribute. If it's something I see it's good, it's something which I understand the greatness of, I'm attracted to it, I have a feeling, I gravitate to it, and something which arouses fear or reverence, arouses a feeling of fear and reverence in my heart. And so the maila of the man is, the human being, is that his midas are not just just natural to him, like in the experience of the animal, or the expression of the animal, the feelings of the animal, but the feelings are structured, qualitative feelings, because they come from they come from an intellectual structure, structured comprehension on the reality, in this case of a lukus of godliness. So the malachim, which most of the malachim, as he says, again, we contrasted to what he said, rather in the Haggadah, in that footnote, he said there's certain malachim which are unique, but in the overall, the malachim are programmed. And their Av V'yir is Tivis Lahem. Their Av, the love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, fear, which we know when we say in the whole Birchas Krishma, of the great Av V'yir, of the experience of the Malachim, which are Gibedim, Kedeshim, and so on. And their Av V'yir, the love and fear to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a constant basis. But as great as their Av V'yir is, and as much as it's part and parcel of them and their experience, it's Tivis, it's natural. And for that reason, they're called Chayis and Behemoths and so on, because it's not something which is developed through them. It's something, it is just part of their experience of who they are. Again, as we expanded on this point last week. And therefore, they belong in Olam HaYetzirah. At one point last week, I made a mistake also, Bri Yetzirah, if you recall. But in any case, they belong in Olam HaYetzirah, while Malach, while the Neshamis, which not every neshama, by the way, neshamas of tzaddikim gedolim, that their Av V'yir was qualitative love and fear, reverence, polished, qualitative love and fear, is because it came not only as TV is natural to who they are, but as a result of a structured build-up in their mind as chachamim, in other words, the shams and tzaddikim, which utilize their intellect, not for anything else but to invest additional to their understanding of Hashem's Torah, but understanding and appreciating of Hashem himself. So their ava was a unique type of ava. And their yira was a unique type of yira, and so on. All the other 7 midas, ultimately 5, again with the ava yira 7 midas, align with the connection and the feeling and the emotional relationship and sentimental relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore they belong in Elam HaBriya. As we explained again last week, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Chabad usually is intellect, which is again the Chabad of Atzilus. I want to go over it again in detail because we spoke about this last week, which you can see again in the previous class. The Chabad Atzilus is invested in Bria and Elam HaBriya. The Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Midas of Atzilus, Hashem's Midas are invested in Elam HaYetzira. The Malchus of the Mais or Dibur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in Elam HaSiyah. And we explained why this we find in every Elam. Its style and what it's all about is based on what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he invested in that Elam, the intellect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu invested in Elam HaBriya. Therefore, that's the place for the neshamas of the tzaddikim, which their connection of their aviyira of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is based on their intellectual investment within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because and again, the way they lived in Elam Haza is their aviyira wasn't just innate. It wasn't just they didn't just express their natural aviyira, which every yid for that matter has this aviyira. He's a bench of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He has an avu sutez, a very natural love, and he's always inclined to Hashem and even to his Torah and to his mitzvahs and so on. But these neshamas of the Gedolim, they invested so much of their seichel, their mind, into understanding and comprehending the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So their aviyira was a qualitative aviyira, and therefore they belong in Elam HaBei, are in Gan Eden Ha'elyon, which is in Elam HaBriya, as we mentioned. It says in so many places that the Gan Eden Ha'elyon is in Elam HaBriya, Gan Eden Ha'tachton is in Elam HaYetzira. They belong in Gan Eden Ha'elyon because that's where the place where Hashem's Chachma Bina Das, which is the Chachma Bina Das of Atzilus, invests and nests in Elam HaBriya. And that's so basically, as opposed to the Malachim, which is more natural to them, which is again, it's about the feelings without the Chabad, without the intellectual investment, that is associated with Elam HaYetzira, and again for the Neshamas, which would be the Gan Eden Ha'tachton, which their Meir, which shines there, is Hashem's Midas, not Hashem's Chacham Bina Das, not Hashem's intellect, but Hashem's Midas, are nest in Yetzira. So that's where the Malachim would be. That's where the Neshamas will serve the Kodesh Baruch Hu, also with Aviyira, but the natural Aviyira. Again, we explain to our as much as we can to our ability. Then, for sure, this whole above mention, and when we were holding, we were middle of Nun Beis. You can see it as well, the corresponding English text. We're holding middle of page Nun Beis. Which this is called Rusa Deliba, means the desire of the heart, which this love, which is the qualitative love, which is produced and comes consequent to a structured understanding of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is called Rusa Deliba. It's not the natural love, it's the Ava which comes through, as he says over here in Imshachas from Bina Das Bidul Sin Baruch Hu, understanding and knowledge of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is called Ru'usa Deliba. Ru'usa Deliba is where we're holding Nasa Lavush L'Neshama Be'elam HaBriya, becomes a garment for the Neshama in Elam HaBriya, Shehu Gan Eden Ha'elyon, which is Gan Eden Ha'elyon, to the common as we will Be'ez Hashem learn. Now, what does it mean becomes a garment? Which means because just like a garment, even a garment in this world, the reason why we wear garments, this is human convention dictates that we wear garments. We just don't walk out as we are. We wear garments in order to deal with the outside world. In other words, and we wear the garments which the outside world does relate to. So you walk out healthily dressed, and that you're looked at upon as other people who relate to you. They don't relate to your garment, but your garment is a conduit through which people look at you and define you to a certain extent. If you're a neat person, a clean person, an organized person, and then they will relate to you via your garments. Your garment is not who you are, but yet it's a garment which is related, which makes sense to the people of the world and society around you. So too, from this Ru'usa Deliba experience of the Neshamas Tzaddikim, which had a profound understanding of Kodesh Baruch Hu, and therefore they produced this Ru'usa Deliba, this love, or fear, or he says this ava, this love, this qualitative love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, became a lavush, became a garment to the neshama, which again ascends to Eilam Abriya, to Gan Eden Ha'elyon, and it's comfortable there, just like the lavush over here in this world. That's what allows us to interact with the society. So to society, let's call it Eilam Abriya, is about the understanding of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where the Chabad of Hashem, which is the Chabad of Atzilus Nes, that's where Chabad of Atzilus Nes, Hashem's intellect, Nes and Eilam Abriya, that's what the environment of Eilam Abriya is. So when the Neshama, the Tzaddik, which this was his, in this physical world, additional to his Torah that he learned and his mitzvahs that he did, he invested in a structure, understanding in a constant basis. And Yediyas Elokus, again, it's not something which is a man-made idea. HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes in the Torah. It's not just a man's gesture to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu via trying to understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. V'yadaita yehim. Hashem says, I want you to have a knowledge in myself. You should have a profound knowledge. Not you should say it, and not even you should scream it, but you should perceive it, you should understand it, you should be able to internalize the message. These tzaddikim that are yediyah elokus, they invest in their mind to be yediyah elokus, that becomes, and then they produce qualitative midas, and that becomes the lavush, the garment which they could interact with society in Eilam Abriya. What is Kaviyachal society of Abriya? Which means that's the place where Hashem's wisdom, Nes. So that's the perfect lavush, garment, which they could interact with Eilam Abriya, the ambiance and environment of Eilam Abriya, which is again the Chabad of Atzilus, which is Hashem's intellect, Nes, in precisely in Eilam Abriya, which is the Gan Eden Ha'elyon. So that's why it's that's the point that it's a lavush. It's a garment in order to interact with that ambiance, with that spirit, which exists in Gan Eden Ha'elyon, which is in Eilam Abriya. Like it's explained in Zayir and Vayakim. But he says, as opposed to the Malach, like we explained. These are dafke neshamas. These are neshamas which are making the gadol Saint Baruch Hu, not standing. In other words, these are the which part of the yid ascends to Gan Eden. So now, another point over here, as we know that the neshama, there's different levels of the neshama, as it says, Lashon Brad and Zayar, and Kabbalah, but a number of places. Chamisha Shemas Nikru La. The neshama has 5 names, which are 5 dimensions of the neshama. So what is more related to us, we know there's the Chai Yechida, which that's where the Mesiras Nefesh, a person is ready to sacrifice his life, which is again, unfortunately, in our bitter history, we didn't remain a theory. We have millions of Yidden throughout our history which sacrificed the life of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Literally, they're ready to expire, and they did expire. Chanan or 7 sons. I mean, obviously, there's classic cases, 10 martyrs, but there's millions over the years. And that takes enormous energy. The person should make a conscious decision, or to introduce his subconsciousness, which is again connected to the most profound part of the person, namely this subconscious of the Nefesh Elikis, which has enormous, endless energy, and he was ready to expire, physically expire, and leave everything behind because his connection, his love, his dveikus and elokus. He didn't, again, as we know, we learned in this 18th chapter as well, that it didn't mean the most pious Yidden, and more the scholarly. It was the simple folk, which again we discussed it there, because in the end of the day, it's an energy which every Yid has. It's just a matter. Usually, it doesn't come to full state of fruition and expression and manifestation. But when a person is challenged, then Hashem Echad becomes his first choice, and even that would only become his only choice, and whatever the consequence would be. But that's more the deeper part of the neshama, the Chai Yechida. So the 5 names of neshama were given. Let's start there. Chai, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai Yechida. So Chai Yechida is more is more of the really this associated with the subconscious of the nefesh, while the nefesh itself is nefesh ruach neshama. This is what we deal with, namely on a daily basis. It says the nefesh, the nefesh associated with the machshava dibur ma'aseh, our thoughts associated with Torah, our actions associated with Torah, and our speech associated with Torah, maybe leisus or mitzvah say, our expression, are willing to express, to put out tefillin every day, to have a mezuzah in every door, and so that comes of the level of the nefesh. The ruach is more the feelings of a yid towards his creator, towards Hashem, while the neshama is about, that is the dimension within the grand neshama, the dimension within the neshama that is able to intellectualize on the reality of God. So when the neshama comes up, l'maylo, what part of the neshama will enter into Elam Abriya? Understandably, the level of the neshama, more than the ruach, certainly more than the nefesh, because that's what he says, neshamas mamish, which is mechin the gadlus ein Baruch Hu, which is the brain, the sense of intellect, which is able the intellectual, or the part of the neshama which is about intellectualizing, perceiving, understanding, and appreciating the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That part of the neshama enters into Gan Eden Ha'elyon and Olam Abriya. As we said, the Chacham Minadas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Chacham Minadas of Atzilus Nes and Olam Abriya. However, the Ruach HaTzadikim, which is associated with the feelings, just stam feelings and natural feelings, which again, of every Yid, namely as they come to expression by the Tzadikim, and so to other Neshamas, which did not invest much in intellectualizing, in understanding, in any appreciation or comprehension in the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They serve the HaKadosh Baruch Hu maybe with love and fear as well, but the love and fear is more like we said in the previous chapter, is love of the chaya, the extractive, the innate, inherent love and fear. Yid has to Hashem. So when they come on high, their neshama doesn't even enter in Olam Abriya, because they never invested in the Adaita Hayim, in a structured, ongoing basis of investing in the Adaita Hayim. That again, that investment in the Chachma Bin Adas, the wisdom, understanding of knowledge of the Yid in his Creator. They served the Kodesh Baruch Hu. It could have been with love and fear, but more that was a love and fear, the inherent love and fear Yid has. So even their neshamas come on high. So the neshamas are also not entering in Elam Abriya. Even the neshamas are entering in Elam HaYetzira, because they serve the Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Avaviyir, but more the Avaviyir, which is Tivis Lahem, and that's what again we mentioned, the Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Midas of Atzilus nest in Elam HaYetzira. So then the Elam HaYetzira, the ambiance of Elam HaYetzira is about the feelings to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, love, fear, reverence, and so on. That's why it's the place of the Malachim, and again the place of these Neshamas. So the tzaddik who did serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with investing his intellectual capacity, his intellectual faculties in knowing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what comes into Gan Eden Ha'elyon is the neshama. That is the darga of the neshama. Okay, all five names are really, we call it the neshama. But that's in the particular level, which is the neshama, which is the ability to intellectualize and appreciate and perceive Elokus. That goes into Gan Eden Ha'elyon. His own ruach, which is again the expression of his inherent feelings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, goes into Elam HaYetzira. And so to all the other neshamas, not at all did not invest in their V'yadaita Hayim, certainly not in a structured and not in a constant structured basis. So then everything about them, everything, their ruach and their neshama, they all go into Gan Eden only in Elam HaYetzira, which is Gan Eden HaTachlit. Because they were only Shavdos Hashem, they served the Kodesh Baruch Hu with Chilur Chima, which is fear and love. Hamasuteres, the hidden, the innate, the inherent love, the Lev Kol Yisrael, which exists in all of Yidden. If you're a Yid, you have a Neshama. You have a Neshama as a part of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, so you have an innate love and to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Say innate, it doesn't mean that it means it's not much hidden. It means, because it can always extract it. It means that it's something which is part and parcel of myself. It's not something that I invest in building this Avaviyah. Think of, for example, a child. A child gravitates to his father and mother on a constant basis because he makes a cheshbon. His father and mother father brought him to school. His father pays his tuition. The mother gives him good lunch, and good snacks. And there's no cheshbon. It's just, this is my father, my mother, and he's an extension of them. So he has an innate inclination to them. He's driven to them on a constant basis. So that's not. That's again. It is beautiful that the Yid is able to extract this natural avavira, but nonetheless, it's not as powerful. Very powerful, for that matter. Perhaps it says in a number of places even more powerful than that qualitative, structured avavira, which comes as a result of the intellectual investment in the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But yet, there's something very beautiful about that, very structured about that avavira. Powerful because it's against anything inherent and innate is more powerful than anything which is on the surface or produced by something. But yet, this is what produces something. There's a lot of passion, more than the Ava Mesuteres. Not necessarily there's overt passion. Not necessarily there's overt passion. It says in Chassidus a number of places, there's a sira yossi, which is a pasuk in Shir Hashirim, a sister or a kala, a bride. But the sister, it's obviously there's an innate, inherent love. Because it's a family love member. There's the same, there's a blood relationship, and that is very powerful, and it can never disconnect. There's no such thing divorcing. We could stay away, shun away from any family member, but you can't divorce because it's part and parcel of who you are. And it's not a passionate love. Shouldn't be. Not supposed to be. It's a problem if it would be, if it is. Because it's a very penetrating, powerful, potent fire, but yet under the surface, below the surface, very, very, very strong, very fundamental. As opposed to Rayossi is something which the fire is usually naturally more overt, more manifest, passionate. But it's yet, conversely, you see that there is the notion of divorce between spouses, or disconnect between the fiancé, of a fiancé, for example, or vice versa. And so how does that work? Because there's an advantage of both. I'm just saying this parenthetically, that the Ava Mesuteres is very deep, but yet is not as passionate. Again, this is what Shlomo Melech says, that Pischa Chesira Yossi, that they should call the Yid Chesira Yossi, because the Yid ultimately has both. Which is really relating to what he says over here. He has the achesi, which is the innate, inherent love, which is very, very strong, can never be disconnected, but it's not a passionate love. And then he has rayasi. In his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he can develop a love based on his intellectual investment in the greatness and the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which becomes a qualitative love, namely, and as such, it is a passionate love. And Hashem says that our relationship is very much in two-dimensional. There's the Chesi and Yossi, this is what he's alluding to here, that it's very strong, but yet it's missing, it's lacking that passionate love which comes, the passionate qualitative love which comes as a result of the investment of the Meichin, of the intellectual investment in the godless, of the insult of the greatness of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He. So those neshamas serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu only with Chil Rechimu. HaMesuteres, which is hidden in the heart of Am Yisrael. So when they come up, they bechlal to into Bria. Not only their darga of their ruach, but even their neshama level doesn't go into Elam HaBria, because they never invested in what the neshama, in other words, their neshama, what the neshama has to offer, was dormant by them throughout their entire life. But it doesn't mean given from time to time. A person could have some time. We're talking about a structured, constant investment in the Yadaita Hayei Bashavei Solavecha, a comprehensive understanding of the greatness of the infinite of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem Elikim, and so on, like the pasuk continues. Which are these neshamas saying that, and it was dormant by them, and therefore when they come up, even the neshama itself goes into Elam HaYitzir and not into Elam HaBriya. So he says, he starts with the neshamas which did invest, so only the part of the neshama goes into Elam HaBriya. Their own ruach, which is again, they're serving because ruach with the inherent avavira, goes into Elam HaYitzir, and as well all the other neshamas which serve the Kodesh Baruch Hu with fear and love, but as Musa said, so the love which is hidden And in the heart of Klolos Yisrael, again, a Yid is a Yid. He's a B'nai Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore he has that inherent love. So therefore, it doesn't, and that's the way he serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is wonderful. But his service, his expression of this Ava V'Yid doesn't get allowed to go into Eilam HaBriya, as we just explained. Yet, Alter Rebbe says, interesting, and soon explain why, that these neshamas do have a bonus. So, side the ruach of the other tzaddikim, and side these neshamas, I have a there's a bonus given to them. That every Shabbos and Rish Chodesh they're able to go up from Gan Eden HaTachton to Gan Eden HaElyon. They're able to visit Gan Eden HaElyon on Shabbos and Rish Chodesh. The question is why? And Alter Rebbe is going to say. So usually they do not go into Gan Eden HaElyon, into Eilam HaBriya. They're only on Eilam HaYetzirah. And Eina Eilis L'Sham only like with Shabbos and Chodesh, they ascend there on Shabbos and Chodesh, Levad, only Derech HaAmud, through the pipe or the beam, which today in modern language we call like an elevator. Obviously it doesn't mean elevator. It's a spiritual ascend, or rather an ascend, obviously in a spiritual way of that Amud, how it elevates the neshamas from Gan Eden HaTachton to Gan Eden HaElyon, from Eilam HaYetzirah to Eilam HaBriya, but he calls it Derech HaAmud from Gan Eden HaTachton to Gan Eden HaElyon, which is Eilam HaBriya, which is called Gan Eden HaElyon. Gan Eden, the supreme Gan Eden. L'yis'anigal Hashem, to derive, and again that's the experience of the neshama, to derive pleasure of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. U'lihonis miziv hashchina, and to appreciate and to have benefit. Literally, lehonis means to say to have hana, to have appreciation, to enjoy the ray of the Shechina. Again, that's why it's called the supreme Gan Eden. And Eden is Melashon also Tainug. Gan is a garden, which is again more Tainug than a person's field, whereas grain is Gan is more like an orchard, a garden, a place of Tainug. Eden is about Tainug. So why is the supreme Gan Eden associated with Seichel? Because true appreciation, true Hana, like it says, the Gemara, the Mishnah says, Neni miziv hashchina. True hana is what you actually perceive. You know, like even in that limud that he study brings hana lahavdil. Namely, a person learns up gishmak shtikul Gemara, Arav Akiva Eiger, Aktzos, has an understanding in a certain seder of halachas. What you understand, that's what you appreciate, and that's what you derive pleasure of. You have a delight in as per understanding, having an appreciation and understanding in Indian sikhli, in something which is intellectual. So too, when you think about the supreme Gan, the Gan Eden HaElyon, the supreme Gan Eden, the place where the neshama has supreme pleasure, is the world where the Eilam HaBriya, which Hashem's the Chacham Midas Alatzil, Hashem's Chacham Midas is nest there. And it comes, the neshama comes in with that garment which was created based on its investment here in this physical world, in the idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's what we can understand why it's Neni miziv hashchina, like he says again. We'll read this inside again. You could just follow on the text, just 2 lines up again. So he says, L'is'anig al Hashem, ke'ina novit tainu l'seichel nivra, pleasure and delight for the intellect of a created entity, which is even a neshama. It is Elam Hashem maskil maybe via there. This what it intellectualizes, understands, and has knowledge, and umasig, and perceives b'sichle with its intellect, so and within its understanding, what it is given, when it has the ability to understand and perceive the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, it's not just understanding any intellectual concept. You're dealing with a understanding, a profound appreciation of a message which transmits the information of the infinite, the light of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, and that produces a lot of pleasure, which is which, this is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like we said, Hashem, when He says Hashem exposes Himself, and He invests his wisdom and understanding, and his knowledge, basically his intellect, the intellect of Atzilus, into Eilam Habriya. And that's the way that ultimately gives us the ability, even in this physical world, to have the opportunity or the ability to have clarity in our Creator. As far-fetched as it sounds, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself orchestrated this. He commanded us to us in Torah. So he allowed us, even though we are Nivraim, especially in the Neshama Beguf, but even the Neshama itself, in the parts of the inferior parts of the Neshama, it's a Nivra, but yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed the Yid to be able, he orchestrated, and again, an entire process of him exposing himself in order for us to fulfill this mitzvah of Yadaita. So he took part in his intellect in Nes and Eilam Habriya, which gives the ability of the person down here in this physical world to have an understanding and appreciation of the Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He. And that is, again, the reason why this is the Gan Eden HaElyon, when the Neshama comes up in after 120, or generally, let's talk about Eilam Habriya. As we know, Mashiach is coming, everything is going to change also on ground level. But we speak about Eilam Habriya, where the Neshama would, which after living in this world, would enter the experience of Tainug, or enter a state or an experience of Nani Miziv Hashchina. Again, naturally, because it's investment, intellectual investment in this physical world. And when it comes up into Eilam Habriya, which that would be naturally its place, because it built that levush in order to appreciate Eilam Habriya. And Eilam Habriya, that's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu invested his Chochmah Bina Das, which carries the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why the Neshama, even though it's a Nivra, is Nani, as a Na of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it's an experience, an intellectual comprehension, it's intellectual experience, and it's an intellectual appreciation of the Chabad of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which carries the Ein Sof, the message or the energy of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is invested in Eilam Habriya. And that's why, consequently, the Neshama is Yeshiv Nani, because the person has a no, maskil the idea. This is what he knows and he appreciates and he understands in any area, especially when the information is all about Tainug, because again it transmits the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Alter Rebbe asked the question: the fact that these neshamis merit lalis l'mayla malachim doesn't seem fair. Malachim are in Eilam HaYetzira, because their Avivira is, what we said, their Avivira is natural by them. They extract and they serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the programmed Avivira, with the Avivira, which is Tivis Lehem, their inherent Avivira. So therefore they're in Eilam HaYetzira. The Neshamas which had the ability to invest, but they didn't, so they are also in Eilam HaYetzira. Then even their neshamas, not only the ruach, but Shabbos and Rish Chodesh, they have the ability to ascend on that, ascend from Eilam HaYetzira, from Eilam HaYetzira to Eilam Habriya, from Galei Natach to Galei. Now the question is why? It doesn't seem fair. He says the reason, the Alter Rebbe says over here, Masha Zeichas Neshamas Elu, that why does these neshamas, which did not invest in the construction, again, in an ongoing his beinanus and the godless of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again predicated on the mitzvah of Yadaita Hayei Mashavei Salach Keshem Elikim. They serve the HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Ava V'Yira, but yet not through Yediyah, not through Chochmah, not through their Bina, not through their Das. And it was, again, they expressed the kind of constant basis, which is again very special. But on a constant basis, what was underlying, what was their Avivira, which gave them the ability to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu via Hashem's Torah, which is again about a Machshava Dibra Ma'aseh, as we said, the actual learning Torah associated with a thought, speech, and action, or doing mitzvahs and so on. But what was what was that those feelings of love and fear, which again the person has to extract of himself to be careful in every single mitzvah, which again is not to do it. And again, it's not only about doing, speaking, and thinking, looking, and so on, which again we're dealing with very delicate areas within the system of the person. So the person has to have Yiras Hashem in order for him to do everything right, or stay away from everything wrong. Avas Hashem in order to do everything right, namely learning Torah and doing scrupulously keeping all Hashem's 248 mitzvahs. So there was a lot of Av and a lot of Yira, but it was the natural, inherent Av of Yira.